Welcome to Love Your Coaching. I'm Charlie, and today we're going to look at the question, can anyone become a coach? It's a question I've been asked loads and loads and loads of times over the years. Quite often, it's being asked by someone who's considering becoming a coach. Sometimes it's asked by people who are organizing and putting together a group of people who will be training to be coaches, for example, inside an organization. So, why is this an important question? Obviously, it's important for anyone thinking about whether they should become a coach or not. Also, I think it's important for the coaching industry generally to understand, how open we are. We might be, we might not be, in order to be able to allow people to come in and learn and train to be coaches. So, most jobs, most professions, most skills, there tends to be some sort of entry criteria, doesn't there? You apply for a job, there's going to be a person's specification. You sign on for a team, for a sport, you find you're at this level, and then hopefully you go up the levels, but maybe you don't, maybe you stay at the lower levels. I think it's great to think about, does everyone have the capacity to be coaches? If you ask my children, they'll say, well, if you can do it, Dad, anyone can do it, which is obviously the sort of answers that you look for from teenagers, isn't it? But I do actually think that, and I do agree. I when I first started coaching, um, I wasn't so good, definitely not so good. Someone was telling me recently that the potter, Edmund Duval, said that his first 10,000 pots were crap. And I sometimes think about my first few hundred hours of coaching were probably a bit crap as well. So I suppose that goes a bit into this narrative of anyone can learn. I definitely think that we have a bit of a thing in learning generally. We think about the natural. It's a word that gets bandied about an awful lot, isn't it? Oh, they're a natural. Oh, you're a natural this and you're a natural that. And it's certainly the work that we've done in schools over the years when we look at attitudes and dispositions and learning. Maybe some people are more innate. Maybe some people have got more of a tendency to be a way or another way, or good at something or good at something else. If I think I've got four children and one of them is definitely a better tree climber and was at 3 years old than the other children. So maybe they have a little bit of innate something extra. But the whole nature versus nurture argument is, I think, getting a little bit redundant. We see it's a combination of nature and nurture and all sorts of other circumstances as well. So I'm never out there looking for a natural coach. And in fact, anytime that I've ever heard anyone be called a natural at anything, they've probably put in loads of effort. They've worked really hard to get to a level. So my starting point is that coaching is a learnable skill. It's definitely a learnable skill. And it's a learnable skill in the same way that cooking is a learnable skill. Like, it's not one thing. Cooking is not one thing. Cooking is chopping and weighing and measuring and boiling and timing and presenting and on and on and on. Right? There's science behind it as well. Coaching is not just one thing. It's questions, it's listening, it's pausing, it's structuring coaching conversations, it's offering a bit of challenge. And in a moment, we'll talk about it's empathy as well. So all of those things can be learned. And we definitely see in coach training, people come into the coaching room with those skills, to a greater or lesser degree. They have the skills of coaching. So no one's starting at a 0 point. So already people have got something in the tin, already something ready that they can bring into their coaching. So no one's a 0 on coaching, like I'm a 0 on playing the accordion, for example. No one's a 0. And they can learn. And all of the things that I'm talking about, they can learn. They can be developed. They can grow. And people can elaborate and get into a really advanced level on all of those skills. But what we have to look at is, are there any skills that can't be learned, that are just personality based and can't be moved or are almost impossible to be moved? The ones that come up most frequently, I think, are around empathy and around compassion, because we often see that those are qualities that are are like part of our character, or they're a very empathetic person, aren't they? Or they're not very empathetic. We see people like in that, like in that box of like that's a trait that you can't change. And I would argue against it. I would definitely argue against it. I think that over the years, there have been times in my life that I've become more empathetic, around certain experiences, around certain things that have happened to me in my life, and probably times that I've become less empathetic. So it does go in waves a little bit. Um, but I understand empathy a lot more at 59 years of age than I did at 29, even 39 or 49. I do. It's learnable. We can develop it, but it's not about whether we can learn it. I think it's about whether we want to learn it. So we could argue that someone who wants to be a coach, who is interested in being a coach, they're not very empathetic and they're not interested in learning to be very empathetic. Maybe that person might struggle to be a coach. But if they notice, if they feel, oh, I'm sometimes a bit cold, sometimes I'm a bit formal, sometimes I miss the clues, sometimes I'm a bit judgmental, but I don't want to be like that because I want to be a coach. Well, then they can learn it. It can be learned. And it'll be very interesting to look in the next couple of years. One of the things, I'm making this at the end of 2025, and one of the things that's going on at the moment is neurodiversity coaching. Not just coaching people who are neurodivergent, but also the coaches, not all of them, but certainly those who go and do decent advanced coach training in that area. Lots of them are also neurodivergent. And I think that they will be proving that being neurodivergent is not going to be a barrier to becoming an excellent coach. In fact, the amount of people who are getting adult diagnoses in this way and are excellent coaches is increasing. So I think not even that can get in our way. Is there anything that can get in our way? I think the one thing we really, really have to look at, probably for all of us, and as an ongoing thing, is our mental health. There might be times in our life that actively operating as a coach might be too difficult. We might be really struggling with a life circumstance. It could have been a big sadness, a bereavement, a divorce, a critical illness. It could be something toxic internally. If we could have, for example, let's say we're depressed, or let's say we're running too much anxiety, then it might be really hard to be that supportive person and open the space for someone else. And I'm not going to waft those conditions away, but they are also things that we can work on. The whole point, isn't it, I think, of identifying conditions like depression and anxiety is so that we can do something about them. Is so that we don't try and coach by them, by the way, but maybe we're going to have some therapy and work on those things. I've been depressed in my life. I've had therapy. I'm no longer depressed. Who knows? It could come around again. I'm hoping not. Don't think so. But the idea of actually being alert to mental health conditions is probably an important part of it, isn't it? Probably something we need to think about. So what's a summary of what I've said here, these last 10 minutes or so, is yes, I think that anyone can become a coach. Yes, I think that the skills are learnable, even empathy. Yes, we need to keep aware of things like our internal wellness. But mostly, we have to want to become a coach. We have to want to work in this way. We have to enjoy and appreciate both the idea of giving the other person the time and the space to work out their own answers, and also wanting to be the person who supports our coachee in that way. So, what's been interesting? What's been useful, assuming you made it all the way to the end of these 10 minutes? I'd love to know your thoughts. I'd love to know your comments. This is a question that probably doesn't get discussed enough. I've seen a bit of writing about it, but very, very little. So any views, any reflections that you've had about this, do share them. Put some notes in the comments below. Let us know your thoughts. And let also me know how useful this might be and what other conversations this stimulates, perhaps around the kitchen table or with fellow coaches. Whatever you take from today, I hope it is useful for you. Do have a good day. Enjoy whatever you're up to. Happy coaching.